My name is Charles Doland. I worked here 39 and a half years. I saw almost every aspect of this business, from a laborer to finishing school, an apprenticeship program, a training program, and ended up, fortunately, being the president for 8 years of a great company. You couldn't just do large diameter brass rods. So they started to expand into other products. So they got into taking the rod, which they sold as rod, and then taking the rod and turning it into products like a forging, where they would make a rod, cut slugs, and make a forging in a die and trim the flash off, and then either machine it or sell that product. And then they also got into die casting products and automatic screw machine products. And the big industries that we really served after that transition were plumbing, electronics, valves, fittings. Some of the most popular products that the average person would know is if you go to Lowe's and you want to buy a plumbing fitting, whether it's a compression fitting or not, our customers would either use our rod and do it, or we made those for them in the automatic screw machine product. If the forging industry, we would make forgings, and most of that went to the valve and fitting industry. And that went into refrigeration, heating, air conditioning, compressed gas. Some of the people would really recognize if you have a barbecue grill, the valve on top of a 20-pound cylinder, we made those by the hundreds of thousands, and we either machined them to the customer specs, or we sold them the raw forging and they machined them to their specs. So they were astute enough to say we can't just be a little niche manufacturer. So the place grew and grew and grew. So the transition occurred. The Sig family early on had to get some outside financing to grow, but they still controlled the business. And then it turned into Cerro de Pasco, I think 40s, 50, okay? And then the Sig family, there was the grandfather who started it and the father that ran it, but then none of the other people got involved in the business. So they sold it to Cerro de Pasco. And then that turned into Cerro, a publicly traded company, and they had Cerro Wire, which made electrical wire. They had Cerro Copper that made the copper tube, and they had Cerro Metal Products, which was us, that made the rod, forging, screw machine products. And they had Cerro Sales, which was a company that dealt in the metals, copper, zinc, magnesium, whatever. So then the Marmon Company bought us in '76, I believe, and that was a wonderful acquisition. They immediately took Cerro private, and they split all those companies into individual companies. So we were then Cerro Metal Products, and another legal entity was Cerro Copper, Cerro Tube, Cerro Sales. And we were their first big acquisition. It was the Pritzker family out of Chicago, okay? And they took that acquisition, and with our cash flow and everything else, they ended up buying 40 to 50 companies nationwide. Worldwide, I'm sorry, not nationwide, worldwide. And they were a great company. They invested in us, great company to work for. When the Sig family had control of the business, okay, and even after that a little bit, but I'll go to that level. They were very, very community oriented. They were very big supporters of the local YMCA, the baseball teams. I mean, go on and on and on. And in fact, they had a guy that was, quote, an assistant to the president, the second Sig, and that was his job, was community involvement. And they had the brass log, the newsletter which was put out, but they did a lot for the community. In fact, Nittany Country Club today probably wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the Sig family that during those times gave that tremendous financial support, et cetera, even though they didn't own it, but they used it a lot for entertainment, bringing customers in, et cetera. Now, when the transition occurred that it went to Cerro, the publicly traded company, that stuff started to kind of dwindle. I mean, we were still involved in the community, but they didn't have the company picnics and all that. So, but they still did a lot of work. I mean, we were big contributors to the hospitals, the YMCA. I know when we had the 100th anniversary of the YMCA, we donated like $25,000, $30,000 to that. So yes, they were very involved. The other thing is, if you look at the history, there were several generations of people that worked here from the same families. And it was not uncommon, like me, to work 39 and a half years. I knew people that worked here 45 years. Normally, I would say 80% of the people, once they came to work here, stayed here. It was competitive wages, good benefits, and very stable employment. Yeah, there were times where there were a few layoffs, but overall, if you started here, you could probably work as long as you wanted to work. So, good company.
Yeah, that says a lot.
Good companies. Even through the change of ownership.
Right.
So, the Pritzker family basically started with a father and two sons. And the father was an attorney in Chicago, and he had two sons. One was an attorney, and one was an industrial engineer. So they kind of expanded and started to look at industrial acquisitions. So they bought a little caster company, Colson Caster, and then they bought a medical company. Well, then they bought Cerro and took it private. That was the biggest acquisition that they had ever made. And that continued, and like I said, it was a wonderful, wonderful relationship. But the father died, and then they put a lot of his ownership into trust. Well, Jay was an attorney, and he would find the deals and make the deals, and Bob, he was the industrial engineer, and he would take over running the companies. But he never ran the companies. He had a person at every company that was the president, whatever you want to call him, CEO, and he oversaw them. But they were wonderful people. But every time something happened, they put more in trust. So when Jay died, a lot more went in trust. And eventually, the trust owned more than Bob Pritzker owned. And there were 13, I think, siblings, nieces, nephews that were in this trust. And they decided they wanted to get their money out of the business. And the only way to do that was, in their mind, to go public. So they wanted to take it back as a publicly traded company. And they did. And in the process, Wall Street does not like old, mature industries. They like high-tech industries that have a 20 to 30% ROI. They don't like mature industries that have a tremendous cash flow, but maybe an 8 to 10% ROI. So eventually, in my opinion, that's what did the place in. Now, I retired 3 years before the place closed. But, I think that's what really happened. I think that's a pretty easy question. Honestly, like I said prior, there were many generations of people that worked here. And when people work here for 25, 35, 45 years, it's not because it's a bad place to work. I mean, there were a lot of other industry in the area. I mean, you had Corning, et cetera, Erie, Murata. So we kept people a long time, and for a variety of reasons. It was very stable employment. The wages were very good for the area. The benefits were very good for the area. That's one thing. Now, the other thing that I think is very important for everybody, we were probably one of the best educators in this area. We had the best apprenticeship programs in the state of Pennsylvania. And that was in tool and die making, it was electrical, it was maintenance repair, instrument repair and installation. And I went through one of those programs. It was an 8,000-hour program. So without overtime, you're talking, 4 years. But it was comprised of on-the-job training, and it was courses over, we didn't have an internet then, but communication courses. And we trained a lot of people here, and they stayed here. Now, the university stole a lot of our tool and die makers, which was always upsetting because they're an institution of higher education, but they wouldn't have an apprenticeship program. That's one. The other thing, this stream that you look at out here, now this company worked here as a heavy industry from 1917 to 2008, and this is a Class A trout stream. It's still a Class A trout stream. So, yeah. The one thing that the company did, we were very self-sufficient. I mean, we had our own waste treatment facility, which is down at the other end of the property, and we treated all the waste. We got rid of all the metals. We had very few occurrences of any violations, if any. And we never had if you look at Spring Creek, when they had that major fish kill with the Myerex, we never had any of this. And we've been on this stream for almost 100 years. So, yeah. There's a lot of different things going on here. The first place, other than warehousing, storage, was this place. And they tried to keep the atmosphere. They took the old lockers and made that part of the bar. And if you go down to Titan Hollow, you're going to see the old alloy boards, which alloys can be mixed, can't mix, okay? And you see the old gauges from the boiler room. We had one boiler room that supplied heat for all these plants, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, the businesses that are trying to promote public involvement have kept some of the things. The other thing, and I forgot, on what should Cerro or Titan be remembered as? We were a recycling business long before recycling was popular. When we sold rod to customers, or we sold forgings for them to machine, okay, we got back 50 to 60% of every pound we shipped in brass scrap. And all we had to do, if it was segregated, was add a little zinc and things to sweeten it up and make the same alloy. So overall, of our production, of us buying raw copper, raw zinc, and other alloys, 75% we either got back from our customers and or bought scrap on the open market. So recycling was going on here for many, many years. I just think it's been a great history of the community. I hope you get a lot of more employees that want to talk to you. It was a great career for a lot of people, me included, and it's nice to see the thing isn't rusting apart and falling away. I mean, as you go down to the Titan Hollow and you go to the dining area next to the creek, you're going to look at an old bag house for the die cast. And what that was so we didn't pollute the air. And we had a mammoth bag house at the other end of Plant 4. I mean, we did not have a lot of EPA, DPE violations. We were good citizens and had a lot of good jobs.
Can I get you a beer?
Yeah, now you can.